Okay, let me take this opportunity to welcome again all the participants to the Masterclass series on disaster risk reduction and artificial intelligence. Today is the last segment of this series, and we have uh, three sets of speakers. Firstly, we have Data Friendly Spaces, represented by Doug Smith. Then we have CODATA, represented by Francis Crawley. And then we have from UNDRR, Stanley Allan. So without spending more time, let's hand over to Doug to take over and present on data-friendly spaces. Make the presentation by data-friendly spaces. Doug, the screen is yours now.
Thank you so much. I just want to confirm that you're able to see the screen okay, the presentation?
Yes, it is fine. Yeah.
Great. Well, my name is Doug Smith, and I'm the CEO of DataFriendlySpace. We're a global NGO specializing in analysis and AI platform development, particularly in that humanitarian and climate sectors and those spaces. So, what I'd like to do today is to speak a little bit about something we often refer to as hybrid intelligence and how that is creating new opportunities for us. So, let me begin the presentation by saying from the get-go, I think it's important for us to note that we're very new to this in the sense that humanity is just now beginning to understand how it is that alternative technologies like AI and hybrid intelligence are going to change the way we are working. We know that there are hallucinations and biases, and that's a problem within AI. But it's important also to note that if left alone, humans, like machines, simply make mistakes. There are biases involved in any analysis. And so, what we're attempting to do at DFS and with the broader community is to begin to work within those AI frameworks to reduce the biases. Now, I should say that I myself have my own bias here, and that is that humans, with the help of AI, are greater than humans and our own biases. We all come to the table with some level of bias. And I believe, and we are seeing that AI and hybrid intelligence, being able to use AI to build upon our own human judgment, will really are creating dynamic and new opportunities for us. We can amplify our accuracy and our speed. And let's be honest, no algorithm replaces compassion or courage or the search for dignity. But AI is allowing us to do more in faster and in better ways than we used to. Let's speak a quick word about science and the science behind what is artificial intelligence and hybrid intelligence, and how we should be grounded in the ethical use of emergent technologies. The somewhat public philosopher in the United States named Van Jones suggests that we're actually in a moment where we are recreating large elements of human civilization, but it's still up to us and policymakers to determine how much of that is human and how much of that is civil. It's the guardrails themselves that aren't barriers, but they are safety nets that we can put in place to really guide and to travel this road together. This is why the UN Scientific Panel on AI is so important, is because it's beginning to bridge both the science and the policy elements. And I would argue that we also need to balance that with a strong sense of ethical use of AI that's inclusive and engages people at the ground level. We are serious about creating a world where disaster risks no longer kind of threaten people or even the planet. In order to really do well, we have to lean into the science and balance that with a strong sense of ethical understanding, and of course, human judgment. Now, let me speak specifically to what Data Friendly Space and the HLA, Humanitarian Leadership Academy, recently did. We developed a survey, and we had more than 2,500 respondents from 144 countries and territories respond. And we asked ourselves, how are humanitarians using AI? And what we found is that 70% of humanitarians use AI on a daily or a weekly basis. And that's quite an astounding number, 70%. When we delve into the numbers, 93% of humanitarians use or have used AI in their work, particularly those that are working at the implementation level, at the ground level, the local level. But here's the what we call the humanitarian paradox, which is only 8% of organizations report AI integrations that are widespread in their institutions. So there's a massive disconnect that we're seeing between those who are operating on the ground level and the institutions themselves. I think that what that's telling us is that there's a lot of people with Gmail accounts querying ChatGPT. Um, that's good news that people are curious, and we'll speak about that in a moment. But the challenge there is that because those policies aren't in place, and because only 8% of organizations are reporting widespread AI integrations, it's really putting a lot of data at risk. And there's a real policy challenge, which is why the work that UNDRR is doing is actually so vital, is to begin to lay out what some of those frameworks are in order for us to be inclusive and ethical, and at the same time, making sure that we have good data protection and security in place. I will say also that more than half of humanitarian organizations are considering AI. 25% of organizations are in the experimental or pilot phases, so they have little projects they're working on. And another 26% have plans to adopt AI, but they haven't really started. And so it's a great time for us to be having these conversations and to be putting these policies in place. Now, just so we know kind of what this might look like for us when it's implemented well, the opportunities for us to accelerate our work within the scientific results actually have tremendous value. AI allows us for kind of early detection and contextualizing. I think it's ICVA that speaks about the triple nexus, which is context, interaction, and interdependencies. And um, being able to use AI to pull those disparate pieces together really is magical. It's how AI is really going to help us to get over the hump and to create more value. If you think about this case study that's on the screen now, the Gates Foundation has AI scaling hubs that they're developing in Africa. And the whole idea is how can we scale our early warning and predictive analysis in a way that reduces the spread of infectious disease? Now, it's up to us to really think about a multi-hazard warning system. And so use pieces and parts of the different projects to create almost a wraparound contextual and sectoral understanding of what the challenges are in a particular area. Now, it's early days, as I said earlier, and it's important to note that it's our own human curiosity that's driving the innovation. Um, AI is not perfect, and it hasn't solved for everything yet. In the survey, we found that less than half of respondents agree that AI is improving their operational efficiency, and only 38% it's led to better decision making. Um, I think the fact that it's early days suggests to me that people are a little leery, a little worried about trusting AI fully. And I would agree that particularly at this moment, such early days in AI adoption, that's the right posture to take. That said, AI excels in pattern recognition and inference from data. And so while we have to remember that human judgment has to be at the center of the way that we're reacting to AI itself, um, there are opportunities now for that hybrid intelligence. Humans plus AI are stronger than humans and our bias alone. And so what we're finding at Data Friendly Space is that we're able to use the AI systems that we've developed um, as a way of buttressing and creating more rapid responses. So just last week, there were some earthquakes in the Philippines. Um, we did some work around using AI to immediately understand the context and where the problems were within the Philippines. And then we worked with one of our partner organizations to provide them the information and the contextual information so that they could respond more quickly and more fully. It's early days, it's still evolving. Um, and what we know is that the implementation layer, those working at the ground, um, are skeptical about AI. But keep in mind that 70% of them are using AI on a daily or weekly basis. And so that's part of the humanitarian AI paradox is that we have questions, we don't fully trust it. And yet what we're finding is like lots and lots of people are using it on a very frequent basis. Now, let's talk about the importance of those local voices and community engagement. Um, we work closely with a group called Nesta out of the UK, and their crisis intelligence program has really become a model for us in the way that we think about going into a community, hearing about the needs, and then going back and building systems. Um, this, in our opinion, at DFS is actually quite important because keeping the local voice, the local perspective is the best way to understand on the ground how judgment is going to create better decisions. Now, only based on our survey, only 22% of organizations have AI policies in place, and that's going to create some challenges. And that's why the work of UNDRR through the Masterclass, but also other work that it's doing around policy formation is really quite key. From our survey of more than 2,500 people around the globe, 75% of them were actually from the global south. And so the things that we realized and we found is that we need standards that respect local contexts. We need to avoid one size fits all approaches to everything. And then it's maybe most vital that global South voices are part of the conversation, that they're shaping the policy, not just implementing something from the top down. This is going to change our work. Um, I'm excited about AI and hybrid intelligence because I think we're going to move from a point in time survey model to an all the time survey analysis. We'll have much better data, much more frequently than we might have previously in the humanitarian space. So let's talk about another case study here in Kenya. The University of Waterloo in Canada is using AI to predict, droughts in Kenya. And I have to say, um, the way AI and when it's developed well for the ground level has a tremendous impact. I'm the former chairman of Heifer Project International, and I can tell you that yield increases of 15 to 20% um, are massive for smallholder farmers. And where we spent a generation talking about cold chain milk to get uh, cooperatives to engage with markets. Now we're actually going to start thinking much more broadly about how ecosystems of development and resilience create opportunities for investment. So these kind of coordinated systemic approaches to early warning and risk assessment are going to create opportunities for investing in communities in ways that have been quite disparate in the past. But the coordination here is going to be quite key. So, what I would like to do also is to talk about that cost savings. Now, many of you may know this, but AI driven preparedness and rapid response is going to allow us to create huge efficiencies in the way we're responding and creating resilience on the ground. Uh, if we can start getting 60 to 80% reductions in the cost just by banging out some of the inefficiencies in the system, that's going to mean that those vital euros and dollars go that much further. And one study suggests that AI could reduce the cost of $70 billion just by optimizing logistics and forecasting risks alone. That's not an insignificant opportunity before us. But again, that opportunity has to be tempered with an understanding that we need, you know, flexible policies on the ground. And I'll get to just a few recommendations here in a second as we close out my bit of the conversation. Now, strategic thought leadership is vital. And this is, quite frankly, why the UN is so well positioned to create some leadership here. The UN and UNDRR leadership through the Global Assessment Report has been highlighting two important AI governance pillars, which is part of what's brought us together, right? One is retrofitting institutions. So you want to keep accountability among the nation states and the member states, and at the same time understand that state-led decision making is ultimately going to be how we strengthen the net of opportunity, the safety net of opportunity before us. The other is protecting critical AI infrastructure itself from hazards. Um, we know just from yesterday that sometimes the infrastructure itself it can be challenged. Again, it's early days, and it's to be expected. Sometimes cars break down. Sometimes you sit on the runway too long because something's wrong with the airplane. We shouldn't expect AI to be any different. It's an emergent technology. But the opportunity before us is really to take a leadership role as the technology is emerging in order to address skills gaps. So, only from the survey, 3.5 percent of humanitarian workers possess expert level AI knowledge, even though many of those people, again, are using AI every day. So I think the challenge there is that we can find that there's a misuse or misinterpretation of the outputs that are coming from AI. There is definitely going to be an over reliance of AI results, particularly in a time where resources are constrained. And so there's fewer people to be able to lend that human judgment to what is coming out of AI systems. Um, and quite frankly, there are times when people just aren't recognizing where the bias is present. So we need to be building that knowledge. We need to be addressing the gaps. And we need to make sure that all of our policies are focused on building the ability for human judgment to lead the day. This isn't AI leading humans. This is really humans using AI as part of a hybrid intelligence moment so that we can make better decisions. So let me close out my time by giving you what I would suggest are just five suggestions, five opportunities for us as a global community to use AI wisely. One is building these adaptive frameworks, and that's about flexible standards that evolve with a rapidly changing technology. I mean, let's be honest. Why is it that 93% of people in the field are using AI, but only 8% of institutions? Quite frankly, it's because institutions are catching up. They're slow to adopt, and people on the ground, quite frankly, are with a Gmail account, able to adopt much, much quicker. Part is of another suggestion rather is to support before restricting. So it's prioritizing that knowledge gap. It's addressing how it is that we can prioritize capacity building and training on the ground, and quite frankly at the institutional level. The third is bridging that paradox, designing policies that acknowledge and address the gap between individual innovation and organizational readiness. Organizations, quite frankly, just have to catch up or get out of the way. And that probably means investing in some dreamers and some people who are willing to take some risks. We're going to break some things. We know it's not always going to work perfectly, but we also know that this is the future. And so we need to be, in an agile way, iterating into adopting AI in a way that builds our own human judgment. And then, obviously, an evidence-based approach. We need our PM&E structures uh, to really be evaluating what the true impact of AI is. AI is not going to solve every problem. People are going to try to use AI when they shouldn't. These things happen, but really making sure that we're monitoring and evaluating the impact is key. And then inclusive development. We need to make sure that all of our standards are co-created with local actors, using that community engagement approach. And obviously, we want to make sure that we're listening and responding well to the needs of those on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. There are a number of questions for you in the Q&A, which, I mean, some you could just type the answers, but there's one which I thought I'll ask you now before we move to the next speaker, and very quickly, but this is aside from the UN principles for ethical use of AI in the UN system, would you be able to recommend sources for a set of templates for the principles that the remaining 78% of organizations could pattern their principles from?
Yeah, so there's a lot of principles being developed now. I would look towards principles that have a strong connection with communities themselves. Um, I would look, quite frankly, FCDO is doing a lot of work right now, funding some of those principle developments. I can't point you to one specific to your situation, but I will say that this is for me one of the things that I'm interested in UNDRR is really being a point within this nexus concept, which is pulling together well beyond what is just a humanitarian sector perspective. And I think UNDRR is probably a leader in that space. There's a lot of those principles in development. And you can often find those through Kaya courses, Humanitarian Leadership Academy. They're kind of all spinning around. I wouldn't point to one central set of principles that have it all right yet.
Thank you, Doug. And there are a number of questions. Please do have a look in the Q&A and see if you can type out some answers that people will appreciate. So now let me hand over to CODATA, Francis Crawley, the chair of CODATA International Data Policy Committee. The screen is yours, Francis.
Thank you very much, Sanjaya. And I want to thank UNDRR for having CODATA, particular International Data Policy Committee, with us here. Um, I want to just recognize that I'm here with Professor Virginia Murray and Professor Blikberg. Both are in the chat here, and they are really leading the work that we're doing here on the ethical uses of AI for crises. I'll explain more as we go through this here, but I just want to um, thank them for coming here and supporting. And I will give the presentation just because of time to go through, but I think during the questions and so forth, we can ask Professor Virginia or Professor Burchak to support as well. So um, let me get this moving. Here we go. Yeah. So just clean up my screen here. Okay, good. Um, so what we have come up with, and Doug, I want to thank you so much for your presentation. This was a really good setting of the scene here. And I also like the way you brought this into the humanitarian context and also the different uses that we will be seeing for AI in the coming time. I think you mentioned multi-hazards here, and we need to be able to think of the gap that exists between data availability and actionable decisions. And as we know, there's two aspects here that we try to tackle within CODATA. One is this idea of data availability, and the other now, and this is what we're trying to bring in with it, with the AI, is how we can take from that data, from this digital context in which we're living, and make some actionable decisions that actually, as Doug so well pointed out, really help people in the situations when they're in crisis. By the way, I understand this is UNDRR, and normally we speak of disasters here. I'm speaking of crises because you'll see that the data policies that we wrote were data policies for crisis situations where we wanted to include both, well, three things. We wanted to include public health emergencies, we wanted to include disasters, and also we wanted to include geopolitical conflicts. So this is what you'll come up against in our presentation. And what we think is that AI can help bridge this gap between the availability of data and the decisions that we may need to make. It can help us do this. Um, but it also, as Doug very rightly pointed out, introduces risks of bias, opacity, and misuse. So we first worked on, and you'll see these, and I put them in the chat as well, data policies that bridge organizations and jurisdictions. So that's the first thing we needed. And very nicely, Virginia Borchak, myself, and others, we were able to launch these on the 4th of June at UNESCO's headquarters in Paris. We now have these three documents. I hope you can get to the PDFs in the chat. I'll probably put them in again too, just to keep you informed of them. But we really need to get these actionable and implemented too, as well. Now we're also developing, and Doug, you said, as you said correctly, there's many AI principles being out there. None of them seem to cover them all. Anyway, we'll discuss our envisions and pilot AI governance principles here in order to give a more holistic framework and ensure that AI-driven decisions in disaster risk reduction are both operationally effective while ethically grounded. We need these two things. And this is really for Doug, but it's for the whole audience here to say whether or not we're on the right track. We want to know this here. So this session here, we're trying to explore how we can hardwire these principles into your data policies and AI systems for trustworthy crisis response, disaster response, if you prefer. Now, again, we're very privileged to have Professor Virginia Murray here, who co-chaired the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015. And this framework is the framework from DRR, but from this framework within which we understand and we try to contextualize all of our work. So we're working within the Sendai framework. And this is very important for us. This is a key place where we're working in. The Sendai framework, as you know, is a global outcome. It has 13 guiding principles, 4 priorities, 7 global targets, and it is the framework in which we now have the reporting on disasters for the global context. And it also gives us the basic, let's say, way to communicate with one another, way to share with one another, uh, how we are forming our policies and how we are responding to the emerging disasters that are emerging all the time in the world we know here too. And I also, then we have a very important here update of the hazard information profiles together with the hazard definition classification review here. These two reports, again, chaired by Professor Virginia Murray, who's with us here today. This also gives us, let's say, a set of not just definitions, but even more than definitions. And I've we've put the link in the chat as well for this, but also gives us, let's say, a kind of, from a data perspective, a kind of ontology for the different classifications that we have for disasters. So we need this ontology if we're going to, let's say, build data systems that can communicate with one another. And that's where our data policies come in as well. So you can see here, and this is a huge work. I forget how many pages is it, but it's a very, very thick booklet that Professor Virginia has prepared for us. But you can see each, let's say, each typology, each classification is very well provided with a definition, with a reference, with annotations, and with some kind of background that gives us much more than just a definition, but a whole framework in which we can build on here. And here's just one for flooding, and there's more, and we could speak about too. One more thing that I want to put out here too. We are working very closely within the framework of the Pact for the Future. We were very happy to see this when this was launched in September 2024. This is a really forward-looking document from the United Nations that puts us really in the digital space, that also puts hazards, disasters, and so forth within this space here, and gives us a global framework in which we can try to address this. And what we're doing with CODATA here is to try to address this in CODATA, which is the Committee on Data of the International Science Council. So what we're trying to do within this is to address how we can have in this digital space better communication and better crisis response. And by the way, not just crisis response, as Professor Burchak would say, but crisis preparation, response, and recovery. So on the 4th of June, we introduced, as I already said, these 3 documents into the Open Science School Toolkit of UNESCO in order to strengthen cross-border crisis data management. And it was done, of course, with CODATA here. So in this framework here, we have these 3 documents, the fact sheet, the guidance document, and the checklist. Now, these are all in the chat, and we really would like to have you look at them. And also, we're expecting that at the beginning of next year, with UNESCO, we will launch some pilot projects so that they can actually be implemented into practice. And we're very much hoping that we can do this together with UNDRR, because this would really strengthen it. But we also need the people here, especially the people here. It's a fantastic chat if you see the people here. And we want these people here to help us to make these, let's say, this fact sheet, this guidance document, and the checklist into a reality. And as Professor Virginia would say, we need to tackle the urgent and emerging crises, the data policies, so that they align with open science principles. And I just want to emphasize here, the open science principles are critical, and they'll be critical not just for these data policies, but also for the AI that I'll mention in a minute as well. So they guide how to manage and mobilize data ethically, inclusively. This is all Doug's words again. We take over maybe efficiently across scientific, humanitarian, and policy sectors. So this is really important. How could we use the data that we have, the data that somebody collects in a humanitarian organization, that somebody that collects from a weather station, that somebody collects from um, building plans or something like that? How can we collect all of this data to most effectively prepare, respond, and recover from crisis situations? And of course, we hope that they're relevant to global emergencies such as pandemics, climate-related disasters, and conflict situations. So now we've gone on, and actually we've done this firstly, and this is from a colleague at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. This comes out of Africa here. Doug, I really want to hear your opinion on this as well as everybody else's here. But we've developed a set of principles called the Envisage Principles for AI governance. And you'll see after we also have the pilot principles. And these principles are intended to provide like an ethical compass for AI governance, grounded in shared human values. We've put the link in the chat. It's still on a Google document. It's what we're practicing within the CODATA International Data Policy Committee of open authorship, not just open access, not just open science, but also open authorship. All of you, and I see some of you have been there already, all of you are really welcome to go on there and contribute to the authorship, not just the authorship, to make these really good, strong principles for AI governance here. So we have ethics, we have norms, we have values, we have integrity, we have sovereignty, we have access, we have governance, and we have engagement. And The interest here with the InViges principles is not just merely to imagine or to think about what happens, but to anticipate with ethical purpose and oriented action towards just and humane outcomes. I think, again, I'm just quoting what Doug said here. Okay, so importantly here, with these indigenous principles, they're ethical principles, but also, really importantly, they're also cultural principles. And if you read the paper, we've brought in quite a, there's a bit of philosophy around this, but we've brought in quite a bit of different cultural aspects to it here. So we want to respect community and national rights. We want to ensure the honesty and reliability of AI-driven risk information, which is terribly important for disasters. We want to promote equitable access to AI tools and benefits for all communities. We want to mandate or somehow drive local stakeholders, and we have the local stakeholders with us today here, many of them anyway, into the design and deployment of AI. So it's, and Doug said that perfectly too, this cannot come from outside, it has to come from within. And we want to prevent and remedy digital colonialism, not just building trust, but ensuring that the solutions are culturally and contextually appropriate. And that's for you people here to make this work here. And then we thought, okay, it's not sufficient just to have, let's say, ethical principles, nice abstract ethical principles, a lot of philosophy, a lot of culture around them. But now these principles must become embedded in the AI itself. So we also developed the pilot principles for AI governance. In fact, we developed these in China. And what the intention here is to give operational architecture so that we can translate ethics into operation, that we can translate ethics into digital systems, into AI practices within the digital system, not from without. And here we have, and this is really important, these principles here. Purpose, AI must serve specific beneficial goals. Integrity, accountable and responsible conduct. It must be lawful. Lawful is so important. It must be open, transparent, explainable, auditable. This we've all heard. And very importantly, too, AI systems need to be tested. They need to be validated before they come into practice. I think Doug again hinted at this for the robustness, safety, and reliability. So together, we think that the AI and pilot principles create a layered framework, giving us the why with the indigenous principle, but just as importantly, the how into the operations for responsible AI governance. And here I just want to say we can actually translate these into DRR practices. So you need to have a clear, specific goal, a beneficial goal, um, to say why you're using AI and what the purpose is for using that. You need to have tamper-proof audit logs for traceable AI decisions during crises. You need to ensure compliance with data protection laws and DRR regulations across jurisdictions. You need explainable AI, so responders, so uh, people on the ground can understand and trust the AI recommendations. And you need to have that AI stress tested against the extreme but plausible multi-hazard scenarios before they're deployed here. So in conclusion, I just want to say, we need to govern AI, our AI, your AI, if you want to help govern crises through policy, through ethics, and through the operationalization in preparedness, response, and recovery. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Francis. There are a few questions in the Q&A. Please do have a look. And in the interest of time, now I'll hand over to Stanley for his presentation. Stanley, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Sanjaya. I'm going to assume that everybody can see and hear everything,
Yes,
unless I hear to the contrary. Thank you. So firstly, let me say how lucky I feel to be able to present to this class here, largely because of the engaged audience I see in the chat. It's great to be part of such a hive of thinking and momentum. And then secondly, to follow on from the presentations of Doug and Francis, who I think have done an extraordinary job of providing the social and humanitarian context, and then also some of the institutional and ethical principles which we need to be considering when we think about the practical operationalization of AI for disaster and climate risk management. My presentation will be looking at and complementing some of the issues which Francis raised at the end of his discussion there, focusing in quite a streamlined manner, which has been enabled by the previous presentations, on 7 principles that have emerged from discussions at UNDRR with the Red Cross Climate Centre and other partners for the operationalization of AI in context where disaster and climate risk management are of paramount importance. I know there was a question for Doug focusing on possible sources of these ethical principles, and he's completely right to point to the fact that there is, in truth, a proliferation of the principles. There are almost too many. These principles here were specifically drawn from 5 of the bases below, and then considered through a qualitative discussion with expert partners. So with that context, I will jump straight into presenting the first of the 7 principles. Each slide is going to look like this. At the top is a statement of text, then a concept which gives the idea that the text seeks to encapsulate, and then finally some indicative subsidiary principles, which are the principles which go into that specific statement. So each statement should really be seen as an encapsulation of a broader set of subsidiary principles. The idea of fairness and co-creation has been gestured to by both Doug and Francis, and the fundamental truth is that AI systems must reflect the social reality that they seek to impact, systematically including marginalized groups and voices on the ground. I think it was Francis who used the term digital colonialism, and the principle here is absolutely to engage with and counter those narratives by supporting people from diverse backgrounds to engage in the creation of AI systems. Secondly, there should always be a focus on high quality performance and high quality data. Those of you who work in computer science more broadly will have heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. AI, as much as any other computer system, is subject to that dictate. AI systems must always ensure high quality performance, and particularly in the context that we're talking about here. Francis spoke of contexts of crisis. We're speaking here of concepts of disaster and climate risk management. Speed and reliability will be particularly paramount in such contexts. And so some subsidiary principles there include accuracy and robustness. I think a crucial one here is actionability. Not only should the information be accurate, but it should be in such a form that the human users of the system have the capability to work with it to achieve human goals. This emphasis here on data security and privacy recognizes that AI systems that handle significant quantities of potentially sensitive data, including real-time data, as Doug gestured to earlier, must proactively and robustly address the potential security and privacy issues that emerge. So cybersecurity, the right to privacy, and really robust standards for data governance sit at the heart of this principle, of this standard. It's crucial when thinking about this standard to recognize that AI systems will not just exacerbate existing vulnerabilities, but they will introduce new vulnerabilities into how data is handled. And as practitioners, it's our duty to engage head on with those and ensure that we develop appropriate standards. I think this is perhaps the most intuitive of the standards I'm sharing here today, and it can be seen across all aspects of the previous conversations. I particularly liked it when Doug gestured towards the fact that we should be thinking about what AI plus humans can do, rather than understanding the two forms of knowledge as in some sense in conflict. And to just make clear the hierarchy at play here, that AI systems must be placed under the control of human minds and institutions, thereby acting as an enhancement rather than a replacement for human decision-making. I think a crucial context here, Francis mentioned it, is the explainability of AI systems, which refers to the capability of humans to understand the reasoning behind the decisions of AI systems. Also important there, I think, is legitimacy. AI systems, to be effective in their impact within existing human institutions and society, must be understood to have a form of legitimacy so that people can act upon the messages, warnings, and analysis provided. Moving on here to the principle of do no harm. AI systems should neither create nor entrench social harms, both at the micro scale of individual projects, but also at the macro scale. This is one of the more challenging standards to realize, given some of the broader processes and concerns around things like environmental sustainability. That being said, it remains a really important pole star for thinking about how AI systems can be operationalized, that they should absolutely attempt to do to not create any intended negative consequences. I'd like here specifically to flag the digital divide, which refers to gaps in opportunities to access digital technologies determined by socioeconomic, geographic, or demographic factors. And AI both represents a significant opportunity to close the digital divide, but if operationalized incorrectly, we could see it as an accelerant to the digital divide. So the principle of do no harm has a particular importance there. I think the principle of integration really pulls together a lot of the previous standards shared here, and also some of the conversations we heard beforehand. That AI systems should not be presented as external to the societies in which they will be operationalized. Instead, they should be appropriate and sustainable, integrated with existing institutions and existing standard operating procedures. For all that we may see those institutions and operating procedures evolve and react to the new possibilities inherent in artificial intelligence, it's equally important that artificial intelligence doesn't represent a parallel system which provides truths which are not engaged with the existing institutional arrangements on the ground. So subsidiary principles such as coordination and collaboration. And I think particularly the last word on the slide, maintainable, will be a key practical concern going forward. It will be very well to perhaps initiate and integrate AI systems in the first instance, but are they created and shared in such a way that they are maintainable by the people who will have to use them in challenging and unexpected situations? And then finally, perhaps an intuitive principle, AI systems must be designed for concrete impact for targeted communities, including through principles of user-centered design. Here, I think it's particularly important to counter issues of mission creep and ensure that there are defined purposes for each iteration of an AI system. This to ensure that AI is providing a truly necessary and additional context for humans. And then finally, I'll share some short reflections on the basis of these 7 standards. It's clear that the proliferation of investment in AI represents a generational opportunity for risk managers. I think that's why you're all here. Everybody here, I think, represents that early adopter that Doug was talking about, and the possibilities are indeed substantial. The implementation of AI systems also carries significant risk and significant uncertainties. As we try to deal with those risks, principles and standards will represent a key means for balancing between the twin imperatives of ethical grounding and operational efficiency. Those standards will be continued to iterate over the next 18 months, 5 years. I think this presentation has shared, and previous conversations have also shared, that these standards must emphasize context-rich, human-controlled, and socially engaged AI implementation. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, I'd impress upon everybody here that this AI revolution is here to stay, both in the benefit it offers practitioners and the amount of investment at the back end of it. In that context, there is a real duty upon subject matter experts, like everybody here in the chat today, to collaborate with technological innovators who possess a lot of technological knowledge, but are really context poor when it comes to things like disaster risk reduction, climate risk management, crisis management. There's a real duty upon people involved in this chat to reach out proactively, to collaborate, and to make sure that this really exciting technological horizon responds to the needs of our constituency. So I will end there, and thank you everybody for such an exciting conversation today.
Thank you, Stanley. There are a few questions, but let me pick up one. There is one question which anyone from the panel could answer, but perhaps you could do this. Is there a way AI can integrate traditional knowledge and community data to improve local level disaster prediction?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Whoever it was in the chat, it's a crucial one. The first place I go with that question is about the users of AI systems. AI systems will never replace human oversight and human knowledge. So it's incumbent upon the users of AI systems to ensure that that knowledge is integrated. And then secondly, to have diverse and inclusive data sets which go into the creation of the AI systems. I'd also be interested to hear from Doug and Francis on this, but my initial responses are, firstly, practitioners themselves must ensure that they incorporate forms of local knowledge, and secondly, the data sets from which AI systems are generated must be diverse.
Thank you. There is one question for Francis, asking for your thoughts. Somebody is mentioning that they have been presenting and speaking on the AI ethics and morality views with machine learning, and have noted with faith-based community use of AI that ethics and morality starts at home, and part of the community cultural knowledge and understanding for AI machine learning modules to learn. So any thoughts on that? No?
Thank you, and thank you to whoever provided the question. I have to say the question is better than any answer I could possibly provide. It's a really insightful question. And this idea that AI starts at home, artificial intelligence starts at home, but also that intelligence starts at home. Like how we understand the world, how we react to the world, what the cultural determinants are of the knowledge systems that we have, and how we apply those is critically important. And I want to say that I have been in Brisbane here in a conference on the International Data Week together with Professor Murray and Professor Burchak. And they were very good to provide us with some poetry from the local indigenous people that we tried to connect to our discussion of the digital frameworks in which we're living. I think we need to do that. I think we need to make that effort. Not just indigenous people, but all the different cultures, because the cultures are knowledge-based systems, and they are systems that allow. So we have a big challenge in front of us, and we need the people in the audience more than myself or something. We have a big challenge in front of us in order to integrate this digital world, which looks like it's everywhere the same, but is being applied to different cultures, different ways of living, different ways of understanding the world. And this is a big challenge. And it's a challenge also for disasters, I think. Disasters are, in a certain sense, a way to lead us into this understanding of the very importance of the digital space within our cultural communities in which we live. So the question is brilliant. Thank you very much for that question.
Thank you. And I think the last question for Doug, in the humanitarian setting, when the risk is high and perhaps the reward too, what gaps in AI policies have you seen, if any?
Yeah, so the risks are quite high. I would say the gaps in policy are related to the number of people using AI, but they're using it with a Gmail account. And so the real risks around data security and privacy. Um, Ultimately, the pipelines of data, which is one of the most important technical pieces here, we're going to need to figure out how to way to keep those secure, and to know what gets shared out, and what doesn't. And I think organizations are just going to have to struggle through that and probably work with AI practitioners, people that are in the AI space, have that conversation, and then have policies in place to roll that out with local partners. But it is the thing that we're seeing is there's a lot of Excel sheets being uploaded to ChatGPT right now.
Thank you. So let's, because we're coming to the end of the session, let me hand over to Alf. There are some Slido questions for the questions in Slido for the participants. So Alf, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. We have then reached the quiz at the end of this session. Those of you who have joined our previous sessions will be familiar with how that works. If you're new to it, let me repeat that you should go to slido.com, where you can enter the code 1225053 that you see on your screen, or you can use the QR code that you can also see on your screen. You'll be asked to enter a username, and I can see many of you already doing so, that you'll use then for the quiz. In order to maximize your score, you'll need to answer correctly the questions and also quickly. We have 6 questions for you today. All of them are in the form of true and false, like previous sessions, and the 2 from each of the 3 presentations that you have just seen. So if you've been following the presentations carefully, you should have a good chance of answering correctly.
Perhaps you can start.
Okay, then we will start with the first question, and it will be possible to join also the quiz while we are running it. So the first question is, the majority of humanitarian organizations currently have formal AI policies in place to guide their staff's use of artificial intelligence tools. True or false? Yeah, you were split quite evenly on that one. But as we heard Doug say, that's actually false. Only 22% report that they have such policies in place. So the correct answer was false. Number 2, more than 50% of humanitarian organizations are either in experimentation pilot phases or planning to adopt AI in the very near future. True or false? And there, all of you thought that was true. And it was. That was correct. Number 3, The pilot principles provide a foundational ethical vision for AI governance, focusing on shared human values like dignity and justice, while the envisaged principles translate this vision into operational requirements for systems. True or false? A lot of people thought that was true. It was actually a trick question. It's false. It's the reverse. The pilot principles provide a foundational ethical vision, while the envisaged principles translate this vision into operational requirements. So the correct answer was false on that one. Number 4, according to the frameworks discussed, applying the access principle from envisage and the open principle from pilot to crisis data management would support equitable and transparent sharing of data for humanitarian purposes. True or false? Most people thought that was true, and that was correct. Number 5, this is now from Stanley's presentation. Explainability refers to the ability to provide a clear, human understandable explanation of why a specific AI decision was made. True or false? About explainability. Almost everybody thought that was true, and true was correct. And then comes the final question. The digital divide refers to unequal access to digital technologies, particularly concerning internet connectivity and device availability, alongside disparities in infrastructure, skills, and affordability. True or false? Most people thought that was true, and true was the correct answer. That brings us to the end of the quiz. And the one with the best score today was Bhatia Kazi. Congratulations to you. And congratulations to everyone who got 6 out of 6 correct. Thank you. And back to you, Sanjaya.
Thank you very much, Alf. And this brings us to the close of this masterclass series. Next year, we will be bringing in some more modules on deeper dives into flood forecasting, cyclone forecasting, and so on. So that'll happen next year. So let me again thank Data Friendly Spaces Doug Smith, CODATA Francis Crawley and Virginia Murray, and Stanley from UNDRR for providing us with so much information today in this final masterclass. So thank you to all the participants. We had over 1,000 in each session from all over the world. So from very different time zones, and they've all been very patient and consistent. So thank you to all the participants. And with this, we close.